Hello, OpAmp here, and what I have for you today is a introduction to tubular locks and tubular lock single pin picking. You may have seen these locks out around in the world. They sort of have a reputation among the masses as being sort of a higher security lock. I think part of that is because of this sort of strange, exotic looking key. But really, these locks are very similar in function to most other locks. What you'll commonly see online is someone with a kit like this. This is purchased for I think about $15 online from one of the overseas sites. And this is a tubular lock impressioning kit. And I can show you how that works right here. You take this impressioning tool, has wires, you'll push that up, and then you can take your lock and insert and turn, and the lock will open and close. You've basically made yourself a key. You can actually read the bitting right off of there. Like I said, super easy, push and turn, and you're open. This does not work for all locks, however. Some of the locks have unequal driver length, unequal spring tension, and those things can frustrate using this this type of pick. You can manually move these wires individually. Sometimes that will work. It's a little time consuming. For example, this lock right here, I've actually modified. It used to look like this lock, which has a pin in it that's actually pinning the core into this outer body here. But I drilled that out and threaded it so I can gut it for you and show you what the lock looks like inside later. This lock right here, these pins have very, very low spring tension, and they actually just won't move any of those wires into place. So what I'm going to show you today is ways of tensioning the locks, ways of single pin picking the tubular locks, and just sort of what it looks like inside, and general method to get you started. So stay tuned, and I'm going to set up this lock for gutting, and we'll show you what's in there. Okay, so I'm going to show you what's inside this guy. So like I said, normally this guy would look more like this, where they're pinned in the core of the lock. But I drilled this guy out and tapped him so we can actually take this lock apart. You can see here, key goes in, have nice rotation there, relatively smooth. You can hear those key pins and driver pins as you move this lock. And that's sort of a characteristic of these locks. You'll hear it in all the different locks. Let me grab another one here. You can sort of hear that tick, tick, tick. And that's actually the key pins and the driver pins moving past each other. And I'll show you that in a minute once I get this guy apart. Normally these things, like I said, don't come apart. So I'm just going to take my set screw out of there, drop that down, and let's see if I can get you a little bit closer in here. It's probably decent. And what I'm going to do is very carefully remove this top here. Okay. So what you can see here is I've got my key pins right on the top here, and then I'm just going to hold this down for a moment so you can sort of see what's going on. But I've got my driver pins also down there, and let me get my key. Hopefully I'll be able to turn this lock for you. So you can see right here my key pins and my driver pins, and you can actually hear that. And I'm just going to move this apart slightly. It's a little bit of a dicey maneuver. And you'll see the key pins and the driver pins lining up right there. And you'll see how they actually move past each other. And that's where you get that click. So what happens is when there's no key in the lock, and I'm going to try to do this without everything going flying. Sort of have to reset the lock so those pins don't go crazy. You'll see you've got your key pins in there, your driver pins are below it. I can show you right here. If I push on that, you can see we've got it springing right there. And so it's really really the same as any I guess you would say regular lock, any pin tumbler lock, except the orientation. Let me try to keep this guy together. Like I said, it's a little tough because every time those pins align, they go springing. I'll put that key back in here so you can just see what happens. So that key goes in, we're pressing down, and that means that now those pins are hitting the shear line, and now we can move, and you can see they're moving right there. What I'm going to do, a little ill-advised, but for the video I'll do it. I'm actually going to just pick up the driver portion. They're going to go springing, so I'm just putting my hand over it for a minute. And they're all sort of going to fall out there. So you can see my pins, my springs and my drivers are all down there. And the thing that you'll notice about these is they look sort of like a T-pin almost. But what it is that narrow end is interfacing with that spring. And you can also see that these are rounded on the end. And that helps to facilitate those pins moving past each other. You can see all of my key pins in here now. And you can see how they're at the shear line. If I lower down, they won't be at the shear line. The other thing about these key pins is that they're also rounded. And that's, again, to facilitate the driver pins and the key pins from moving past each other. Number one, up in the corner here, and he's right there. And like I said, if we take a look at it, you can see the key end of it is flat, and the shear line end is rounded, again to facilitate those pins moving past each other, the key pin and the driver pin. Here's pin 2, and you can see that's what we're left with right there. So not a particularly fancy mechanism. Sometimes these will have security pins, but often, you know, they're just sort of cheap locks with the perception that because it has this sort of exotic looking key, that there's something special about it. But the reality is, I mean, this was a $3 lock off of one of the online stores. We'll get to picking in a moment after I get this guy back together. Okay, so I've got the lock set up here in the vise for picking. You can see it works nice and smoothly. You can hear those pins moving past each other. And I'm going to get ready to single pin pick it. So I'm going to be using that bypass tool and the goat for tension. The first thing I'm going to do is take that goat with the straight leg. I'm going to put it right into the notch of the lock. I like to sort of lightly press down and rotate, and that kind of locks it in there. And And again, I'm using like real fingertip pressure, nothing really too hard, because if you push really hard, you might sort of torque it out, and also you're going to bind up that lock. So we'll see if we can get you a nice view here of what's going on. So I'm going to come in and I'm just going to touch my first pin here, and I felt a little resistance and a little click. My second pin there, my third pin, little resistance and a click, and I felt a little turn. My fourth pin, I've got a little click on. Fifth pin, little click on, and you'll see now it's kind of, it'll feel loose, it won't feel springy, just a little bit loose in there. Pin 6 I've got nothing on. Pin 7 is binding, and I'm just going to push down and it's going to turn. I like to sometimes use this finger as a guide so I don't push a little too hard and get out of control. I'm going to come back to pin 1, which is loose. Pin 2 is binding, and I got a little bit of a click there. Pin 3, nothing there. Pin 4, nothing there. Pin 5, nothing there. Pin 6, nothing there. And again, pin 7, nothing there. So now I've gone around, I've got nothing, and I got a click before on the first one. I'm going to let off just slight tension and push right in there. And this way I'm sort of making sure that I haven't accidentally bound anything. Again, I'm just coming around the lock, just feeling, make sure that everything is nice and loose. And we got a little bit of click and some great rotation off of 2. And now I'm feeling 3, I've got nothing. 4, I've got nothing. 5, I've got nothing. 6, we got a click, and we've rotated 1 position. And that's one of the other things with tubular locks. Just because I've now rotated 1 position doesn't mean that I've opened whatever is locked. Not that you should ever be using a lock in use, but if you had, for example, certain padlocks or things like that, or you wanted to SPP this attached to something, I've only turned it a few degrees. There are multiple positions. You may have to pick this all around to actually consider it open. One trick that I use when I'm practicing is I'll take, most of them come with a couple of keys. I'll take one key and leave that little notch on, and the other one I'll grind it off. And what that gives me is the option to reset the lock without having to pick it back. So you can see with the one with the nub, it'll go in, but it's not going to turn because it's no longer the right key. I would have to get in that position, but it's being blocked. So by grinding that off, I can insert this key in really any position. Now if I insert it in the wrong position, nothing's going to happen. But if I insert it in the proper position, line it up manually, now I can turn that lock, reset it back to the beginning, and now I can use that regular key. I can SPP it again, do whatever I like. So that's sort of an intro, the basic technique. Start with some somewhat heavier tension, lighten up until you can get pin movement. Keep going around. When you feel like you've got nothing else set, let up just a little more, go around again, and I bet you'll get an open. So if you have any comments, if I missed something, if I was wrong about something, feel free to leave comments down below. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm out, Bamp. Thanks.